Okay, thank you everyone for joining us on our call tonight. We have Jeff Bost. Jeff Bost is part of our Activz advisory board. Jeff is a PA, is a clinical instructor in the Department of Neurosurgery at University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. He has worked alongside Dr. Maroon for many years. He has a special interest in minimal invasive spine and brain surgery and has collaborated on scores of scientific medical papers and books in these areas. We are so excited and honored to have Jeff part of our advisory board team, and he's here to talk to us about epigenetics and how that relates to our products. He's going to expand on the presentation that Dr. Maroon did at our Activz 2020 event. So Jeff, I am going to turn the time over to you, and we are so excited to have you join us tonight.
Well, thank you, Angie, and thank you for everyone coming this evening, whether it's live or watched later. I appreciate your dedication to doing this evening. Should I just go ahead and hit my slides then?
Yes, go ahead. You can start sharing your screen and we'll get this started.
How's that looking?
That looks great. It's not in presentation mode, but that's okay. We can go with how it is. This is great.
All right.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay. Technology, you gotta love it. Well, again, thank you all for being here this evening. As Angie said, I've worked with Dr. Maroon in neurosurgery for many, many years. And we always get the same question: why is someone who worked in neurosurgery, neurosurgeons, involved in wellness, involved in things outside of neurosurgery, basically? And over the years, you know, we keep on in neurosurgery fixing the car after it's broken. It's like anything that you tend to wear out, and people that don't take care of themselves wear out faster. And so over time, we've gotten tired of doing surgery on everybody and tried to think of ways to help them prior to surgery, meaning healthy living. And we've really embraced that idea, and the people that we've met over the years have really embraced a lot of the things that we've discussed. And that was really one of the major reasons we coordinated with Activz and joined on the medical advisory board, because Activz has a similar philosophy, whether it's nutrition or lifestyle or all the things that are encompassed in how Activz works through employment. All that is important to us because it's about the whole person. Don't want to think about just the spine or the brain. We want to think about the whole person. So today, as Angie said, I'm going to elaborate a little on what Dr. Maroon had spoke about at the convention. Hopefully many of you listened to that. It was very enlightening, not only Dr. Maroon's speech, but many of the others. And it really gave a great insight into what's happening at Activz. Today, we're going to talk about the understanding the importance of epigenetics and Activz product. And again, as I said, we've been with Activz as medical advisors, scientific advisors for about the last year and a half. And one of the things that spurred us to participate with Activz was the concept of epigenetics. We've sort of believed in it or learned about epigenetics about 15 years ago. And when we learned about, through David and others, about Activz products and their feelings on epigenetics, it really sort of meshed. So today we're going to talk about understanding it a little better and understanding how these products that Activz has activate epigenetics. I think it's a core understanding that you have to know to talk about these products to understand epigenetics. It's not, you know, sort of peripherally understanding, but really understand it so you could have a conversation about it. And that's to another degree. So even though some of this is repetitive and may sound like Dr. Maroon, or I may say things over and over, the importance of understanding epigenetics is really key to how we're going to move forward. So that was my introduction, and we'll get started here. What we're really talking about, as I said earlier, is about wellness. Wellness is the active process of becoming aware and making choices for a healthy and fulfilling life. Wellness is more than being free of illness. It's a dynamic process of change and growth. It's a lifestyle. So it's really an adoption of not only nutrition, but activity, the toxins you try to avoid putting in your body, avoiding stress, and those are a lot of things that we've talked about over the years, those 4 pillars as we call them. So it's really a lifestyle that I wanted to discuss and how those things work through epigenetics. And this is just a slide that a lot of people have used in the past, demonstrating those sort of parameters that we talk about wellness: physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, social, and environmental. The idea that we're just not one of those categories, we make up all those different categories, and we have to sort of check the boxes to make sure all those are in order to really have wellness. And as Dr. Maroon showed you in the past, especially at the conference, the convention rather, our idea of wellness is the idea of the balanced square. And I think most of you have seen this from us in the past, but the idea of balancing work, family, and social life, our spirituality or meditation or whatever we do to calm ourselves and get us back into mental clarity, and then the physical side. And the idea of the balanced square, meaning all sides are approximately equal as far as how much effort you give into each of those sides of the square. So if you're working all the time, you're neglecting your family and physical and spiritual. You're doing physical all the time, you're neglecting the other. And it's the idea of balance and how do we go about balance. So these are important concepts as far as wellness. So really our choice is to be well or not. And that's really the most important thing I think that we can get out of this talk, as well as many of the other things that Activz tells us, is the idea of choice. Granted, there are genetic conditions, granted, there are things that are outside our control, but to a large degree, our wellness has to do a lot with our choices. In the US, for example, there's unfortunately, at least this was before COVID, of course, there's typically about 2.4 million deaths annually of various causes. But the vast majority, about 2 million, are due to preventable things. So what are some of the preventable things that we, and again, that makes up about 82% relative to bad choices. So what makes up some of these things? Well, the vast majority, as you can see from this slide, this listing of causes of death are due to our diet. Now, the first one, of course, is smoking, which is something that unless you were required to smoke as a child or some other requirement, that definitely is a choice. High blood pressure, there is some genetic links to it, but a lot of it is caused by diet, things like excessive salt and obesity. That is the third most common cause of death. Again, related to diet in some way. Some people have physical disabilities, they can't exercise, but that is something that is a high death cause, or inadequate physical activity. But if you look at the list going below that, high blood sugar, elevated cholesterol, high salt, low in omega-3s, high trans fatty diet, alcohol abuse, low intake of vegetables, and polyunsaturated fats, these are things that we can control. So again, the idea of choices, to be well or not to be well. This is a very important slide because it tells us that we, for the most part, we have, during crises, maybe not as often, but for the most part, we have a choice to get foods that have high vitamins and minerals in them. We can choose to get probiotics. We can get things that are healthy as far as food for us. But yet, the vast majority of us choose to the left of that slide not to consume them. Whereas below the red line, we see our Americans are, that this slide was taken from a survey of Americans, we generally are eating too many added sugars, too many added fats, and too much salt. So again, our diet is our choice, and we're failing, which is not a good thing. There are lots of reasons why we don't eat healthier. Healthy food is often more expensive. We often eat at fast food restaurants, which again is less expensive, but carries a lot of fats, salts, and sugars with it. If you skip a meal, you're going to be extra hungry the next meal, and you tend to binge. And then mislabeling. What is really organic? What is healthy? These are words that are found in packages everywhere, but a lot of them aren't really true. So to eat healthy is a difficult chore. So how do we take control? What are the things that we can do, especially for our diet, to try to ensure that we are getting proper nutrition? Well, this is a slide that was tracked sales from 2016 and projecting to 2022. Worldwide supplement sales, and it's in the billions of dollars, and you can see every year it's going up. This is a clear sign that this is from a survey of a worldwide, not just America, not just North America, but the whole world is using more dietary supplements. And what that tells us is people are recognizing the fact that they are having trouble maintaining nutrition, and it's reflected in the growth of supplement sales. So how do we know, though, what's a healthy choice? And I think this is what people require: education, and require reading, and require good sources of information, because it's difficult for a lot of people to be knowledgeable on what's healthy. And I think that's one of the things that Activz does with a lot of these conferences and phone calls and the convention, is to try to give us the discernment, the ability to tell which is healthy or not. And so I'm going to dive into epigenetics now, and really that is the science that tells us a lot how those 4 pillars we talked about earlier in the square or the round circle that had the various ones, how those lifestyle things, those choices, can affect each cell in our body for healthy things or for not so healthy things. So a simple question, and I think this is, I put this in here for the reasons that I know you all are distributors and you're all interested in how to get the dialogue going with epigenetics. And a very simple question is, why don't identical twins die on the same day? You know, why don't they die on the same day, and why don't they die of the same diseases? You know, what are some of the things that you can think about? Well, if this was an audience that was live, people would raise their hand and say, well, what about smoking? You just talked about that. Absolutely. What about a poor diet? What about physical activity or lack thereof? These things happen differently in everybody, whether you're identical twins or not. The exposures to toxins are different. So typically, quite frankly, identical twins don't die on the same day, and they don't necessarily die of the same disease, although certain diseases are more common. But the question sort of says, well, how is it that they have the exact same genes and yet they don't have the exact same illnesses? And that, again, tells us that there's something else going on, something outside our genes that is affecting our bodies as far as longevity and health. So that's called the science of epigenetics. It's those factors that are consumed or exposed to that influence our genes, either for healthy or unhealthy outcomes. So I described some of those when we talked about those, whether it's smoking or a poor diet. Those things actually enter the genome, which is basically the blueprint of our cells, to either function for good or for bad. So what are some of the things that influence our genome in an epigenetic way? And one is nutrition. We've talked about that. Physical activity, our emotional state, and pollution, whether it's environment, whether it's from air pollution or water pollution. Those things all have an influence on our genes. So this is a really cool slide, and I'd like to spend a little time with this. NASA last year sent a twin into space. His name was Scott Kelly, and you can see him here on the right. He does not have the mustache. And his brother, Mark, are identical twins. And for a year, Scott spent on the International Space Station. They're both astronauts, but Scott spent a year in space. But before they went up, they did a battery of tests on both of them, looking at all kind of biologic markers and height, weight, everything you can name genetically. And this is the results of that experiment. So there were temporary non-epigenetic changes, meaning things just sort of change because over time, whether it's the lack of gravity or the type of food in the space station or whatever. Those changes included his weight, his vision changed a bit, his immune system meaning he became a little more susceptible to infection while in space. And those things that generally return to normal after a period of time when he's back on Earth. But there were permanent epigenetic changes, meaning just because the environment he was in, which is space, which has never been done before, which I'm not advocating because we're not going to be doing it, but his telomeres, which are the little caps like on shoelaces on each end of the chromosome, actually got longer, and that's an indication of actually longer life. So the telomere is it's a genetic material, but it actually doesn't encode genes, but it's on each chromosome to prevent it from unwinding, if you will, or basically falling apart. So the longer the telomere is, the longer that chromosome can last. And in fact, when he was in space, his telomere became longer. Therefore, he theoretically could live longer. So that's quite an experiment to find out, and that was done epigenetically, meaning there's no other explanation. His genes of his brother remained the same; it didn't change. Well, here's excuse me. Here's something even more interesting. NIH did a study of women who took multivitamins. They did not go to space, and yet those that took more multivitamins or food higher in vitamin C and E also had 5% longer telomeres compared to those that didn't. So it just goes to show that things epigenetically can occur with healthy diet. So this is really the slide that Dr. Maroon has given, I think, multiple times. I've used it in multiple presentations as well. And it sort of summarizes the concept of epigenetics. And Angie, I'm not sure if you can see my little arrow on here. I think you can. But there are 4 sections here that we talked about earlier. Physical activity or exercise, nutrition, the environment, and then emotional state. And so if you eat a poor diet, and this is depicting someone who, or excuse me, if you don't exercise, this is depicting someone on a couch who is the quote-unquote couch potato. What happens are signaling molecules from this inactivity are transmitted by transcription factors. These are signaling molecules that can enter the cell and go into the nucleus where the chromosomes are located. And they can turn on genes, in the case of sedentary lifestyle, to increasing inflammation, increase oxidative stress, which ultimately can lead to greater disease, for example, heart disease. If you eat a high-fat diet, have inflammatory obesity problems, or hyperglycemia, meaning a lot of sugar, things like poorly controlled diabetes, or not even knowing you have diabetes, metabolic syndrome. These also cause transcription factors to communicate back to the chromosomes, which make inflammatory products. And the same thing with environment and emotional stress. These all work through the chromosomes through transcription factors, causing negative outcomes. So people, they'll say, well, what's the big deal if I walk 20 minutes a day? Or what's the big deal? Well, the fact is it can affect your genes in an epigenetic way and change your lifestyle as far as worsening your health if you are not doing the right things. Versus doing the right things, for example, exercise increases your BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotropic factor. It actually can build new brain cells. Exercise is great for increasing neurotransmitters that can reduce symptoms of depression. By having good diet, including nutritional supplements, polyunsaturated fats, omega-3s, a Mediterranean diet, calorie restriction, all these things have been shown to cause positive transcription factors, which influence the chromosomes for positive effect. Same thing with the environment, having a clean environment, not smoking, of course, and then having a balanced emotional life, reducing stress. These all things are anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, anti-cancer, anti-heart disease. So it's really the summation of what epigenetics is in a very simplistic form, but I think it can be communicated in a way that people can understand it. And why is this important? Well, the fact is The two major products that Activz has, Lynx and Optimed, both work on the epigenetic system and are epigenetic activators. So I'm going to go through some of that. There's other benefits besides that, but they also work through epigenetic pathways. And this is important because epigenetics means it can affect every cell in the body versus targeting a certain organ or a certain part of the body. The fact is that every cell in the body has, except for red blood cells, have a nucleus where their chromosomes can be affected by these products. So let's talk about Lynx. There's a benefit beyond epigenetics in Lynx, and that is the butyric acid is actually energy. So when I have Lynx equals energy, it's the butyric acid I'm referring to. Butyric acid provides energy in and of itself. If it makes it to the colon, which the coating of Lynx allows it to reach it to the colon, can actually provide butyric acid, which is one of the energy sources used by the cells in the colon. But we typically, those that aren't taking Lynx or those that aren't having a good diet, may have significant nutritional deficiencies that cause low cellular energy. And those things, as we discussed earlier, are poor diet, diets high in fat, salt, sugar, high calories, and low in nutrition and fiber. As well as a lot of people, unfortunately, have absorptive disorders, things like digestive diseases, celiac, irritable bowel syndrome, leaky gut syndrome. These are all things that can lower our ability to extract butyric acid or other energy to feed those colonic cells. So basically, something like butyric acid, if you can get it into the colon, which is what the Lynx product can do, can increase energy. So this is outside of the epigenetic factor, but it actually is an energy source for those cells. But there are specific epigenetic benefits of Lynx. So typically, if you can see my little arrow here, at the top, we consume a diet that's a nutritional diet, and our intestinal flora break down, and butyrate and butyric acid are essentially the same words. By having a good diet, increasing your butyric acid, you can have epigenetic activation, meaning that butyric acid actually goes through transcription factors into the cell and causes these benefits. It's anti-carcinogenic, anti-inflammatory, improves insulin resistance, which can occur in people that have metabolic syndrome, where they need more and more insulin in order to drive sugar into the cells. It can affect cardiovascular diseases, improve immune system, neuroprotective. So these are factors in and of themselves that are epigenetically benefits of butyric acid in the body, whether it's provided by a Lynx product or whether it's provided by your diet. And again, going back to most Americans and most people, our diet is not able to provide us enough of those nutrition. So specifically for these areas I talked about, colon cancer, butyric acid can repress or depress epigenetically genes in cancer cells, and this is important implication for cancer prevention. So what they've done for something like this is they've done studies where they've tested butyric acid levels in the colon in people that had a history of colon cancer versus people that didn't have a history of colon cancer. And what they found is those that had colon cancer had very low butyric acid, whereas those people that did not have a very high or a higher level of butyric acid. So the idea that butyric acid in the colon most likely is preventative for the colon cancer, many of the colon cancers that exist. It also, butyric acid can repress or suppress extra blood cells from going into colon cancers to actually cause it to spread. So it represses their recruitment of extra blood vessels. And it also slows the growth and activation of cancer cells. So if a cancer cell starts to develop, butyric acid can slow it or even stop it. So these are very important factors epigenetically that butyric acid can do. Butyric acid, and I'll go into Optimed as far as its anti-inflammatory effects, but butyric acid epigenetically also has anti-inflammatory effects to suppress NF-kappa beta, which is one of the primary inflammatory molecules that our body makes in response to stress. It also can reduce colon inflammation, which we talked earlier is associated with diseases of the colon, such as irritable bowel syndrome and ulcerative colitis. So it can be very beneficial to help control those conditions. It also can affect body-wide inflammation. As I said earlier, since it works epigenetically, it can work in every cell in the body by decreasing inflammation associated with prediabetes and obesity. So again, this is a very important substance within the Lynx product. So we're going to jump over just to review all the benefits. And this would be a good slide. Angie said this will be made available. The benefits of butyric acid in Lynx: it directly improves the energy to colon cells, decreases inflammation in the gut, perhaps the entire body, enhances vitamin absorption. We need vitamins for every metabolic process we have in our body, whether it's in our colon or in our brain, our heart, wherever we are, we need the vitamins. It also, as I said earlier, or I did not say earlier, but it can increase BDNF, that brain-derived neurotrophic factor that physical activity can increase, but also butyric acid. It also increases the neurotransmitters serotonin and dopamine. It benefits the heart, the immune system, and brain function. So these are all the benefits that have been linked to butyric acid as a summary slide. So now we're going to talk about Optimed. Optimed is a fantastic product for two reasons: curcumin and boswellia. These are two natural herbal supplements that have been around for decades, centuries, that have provided benefits to countless countries and other people around the world that many of the Western countries have not utilized. And it addresses specifically the idea of silent inflammation. Those things earlier we talked about in the epigenetic pathway, things like an unhealthy diet, chronic stress, elevated blood sugar, pollution, toxins, a lack of exercise will definitely increase the inflammatory levels in your body. Optimed every day can, because of the curcumin and boswellia, can act to lower inflammation. And there's tons of studies related to this. And it can basically rebalance inflammation to a lower level. And this is a very complicated slide, and I hate to show this to you, other than the fact that this is all the epigenetic pathways associated with curcumin. It's absolutely unbelievable all the ways that curcumin can work through the body to decrease inflammatory factors, decrease carcinogenesis, which is cancer production, angiogenesis, which again was the idea that cancers recruit blood vessels, and cancer invasion. So epigenetically, curcumin is one of the master epigenetic pathway creators as far as health and wellness. So again, I think it's important, and I know this is really quick and a lot to handle. As I said, Angie will have these slides available. But the bottom line is that we have to understand that epigenetic explains how physical activity, environmental exposure, mental health, stress, and nutritional influences influence our genes for either good or bad. And that's really the most important thing to follow. Number two, Activz uses ingredients that activates these genes through the science of epigenetics to improve health and wellness. And finally, understanding epigenetics gives us the power to activate our genes through better choices. Again, it's all about choices. If you know the right choices, then it really becomes a no-brainer as far as which to choose. So I understand there aren't any questions available on this format, but I think this is fairly succinct, and I hope perhaps Angie, we're going to get this put together as a PDF. We'll have this available to everyone.
Yes, Jeff, this is great. Thank you so much for the call. This was fabulous information. I learned so much just listening to you, and I know that others have as well. So thank you so much for joining us tonight and providing with all this great information to us.
You're welcome. Everybody have a good evening.